Folks, I'm Landis. I'm the executive director of the nonprofit Maine Rivers, and our mission is to protect, restore, and enhance the ecological health of Maine's river systems. We're a teeny tiny organization, always enthusiastic to work with Alewife harvesters, and I figured what I would do today is talk to you a little bit about the China Lake project that we finished last year, share some of our lessons learned, and then talk about a couple other projects that we're involved in, and then maybe see if you have any questions. So I'm no Mike Brown, but I will do my best to share some of the information about the many things that we've got going on. So I thought I would start with the kind of depressing overall picture of stocks declining, and something that motivates me to do the kind of work that I do, which is to focus on dam removal, improving access to habitat, and trying to bring our numbers for native sea-run fisheries back. So I look at something like this, I don't feel my heart surging with joy. I feel it with something like less than 10% of our historic habitat accessible to alewives. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to open up rivers and streams to get our fisheries back. And so with that, this is kind of a quick overview of the China Lake project we worked on more than 7 years. It involved 6 dams, and our goal was to reopen access for fish making their way up the Kennebec to the Sebasticook into China Lake, where they had some 4,000 acres of habitat. It was a project that people had been thinking about for a long time, but it really took kind of one energizing entity to take it on. But Maine Rivers was very central in the project. We worked very closely with Native American Bone Mill, and the reason that I put these guys here was I like old pictures, plus what we learned through this project, and what I'm sure a lot of you have found. The fish know what to do. It's the people that are super complicated, and it takes a lot of time and energy and perseverance to figure out how to get around the people so that you can get a project to work. And we spent a lot of time doing outreach, talking about why we wanted to do this restoration project, talking about the ecological value of alewives to the Gulf of Maine. We were happy to be able to talk about the increasing value to the town of Vassalboro that has one alewife harvest at Weber Pond, but when they, you come to a meeting with, their budget committee and describe access to China Lake, and you'd see somebody pulling out their pen and say, how much larger is that than Weber Pond? So the fact that the town had harvesting revenue was a huge factor in their interest in supporting the ongoing work. So 6 different sites, yep. And one of the big things we had to deal with along the way was talking to the people in the town of China, in Vassalboro, and sometimes beyond about what we were trying to do. And we came up with this thing that I call the fear of the muddy trickle. So when you're talking about removing a dam, which is the most effective way to have fish passage, the best way to make it possible for fish to get where they want to go, people will often get this disaster Armageddon idea in their mind of you're going to remove a dam and you're going to have acres of mud forever. And so this was actually a picture that I took when we were doing some of the work behind the Lombard Dam, and we had to lower the water, had to remove the impoundment. You can see Nate Gray and Matt Streeter, who were 2 primo, hardworking, enthusiastic, brilliant people who worked on this, wearing waders, and you can see snowshoes in the back. So after we removed the water, we had to estimate the amount of sediment to make sure that DEP would understand that we weren't going to be flooding the stream with sediment. So this involved going around on snowshoes through the mud. There were a few perilous moments, but the reason I included this is that I think people expect this is what you're going to have forever when you remove a dam, and it's not true. The riverbanks green up, they come alive, and you don't have this muddy trickle. You do have to answer lots and lots of other questions when you're talking about removing a dam and bringing back a run of fish. And so we had to find answers to all of these questions, and we had on the order of 14 different public meetings pretty much before we got started. So we found, it takes time to make sure you know what you're talking about and get ready to answer lots of questions. This is a pretty central part of what we were thinking about all the way along. So these were non-hydropower dams, and we were working, 5 of them were privately owned and 1 was owned by the town of Vassalboro. So in each case, we were looking at a dam, trying to figure out what's the best solution here. Our primary interest was in fish and being able to make it possible for the alewives to get to the lake and back, but we had to work with the dam owners, answer lots of their questions, and then figure out how to get it permitted and paid for. So at the top here, you can see a little building right there. That's where the old Massey Dam used to be. There was a sawmill there, and all of the area that's green was underwater for hundreds of years. So we knew that in this site, it was going to be most efficient and way less expensive to remove the dam and not install a technical fishway. However, as happens sometimes, one of the neighbors didn't agree, and we probably spent a year talking to her in meetings and all sorts of things, describing why a technical fishway was not going to work there. At the bottom is the Box Mill Fishway, which is now the first fish passage site that fish come to coming up from the ocean. So this had been an old dam. We went through, honestly, years of trying to figure out what solution we could find here. There was a blown out dam. There was also a bridge. We spent time talking to engineers who told us that, for instance, if we removed the dam, it might destabilize the bridge, and then we'd have to figure out how to replace the bridge. And by the way, the guy who owned the dam really wanted a fish ladder there. So after years of discussion, we built this, I think it's beautiful, fishway, but it cost, nearly $1 million. And that was just one of these 6 sites. So one of the things I want to share with all of you is this basic idea that when you're looking at barriers for alewives, for eels, we have lots and lots of dams in Maine. Very, very few of them are hydropower. Lots and lots of them are old mill dams that have been sitting around for 50 years, 100 years, 150 years. They really serve no purpose. And each and every time you have a conversation about improving fish passage, about making it possible to have more fish coming and going to our lakes and streams, you get into this conversation about technical fishway or dam removal. And this is my kind of horrendogram visual of fishway versus dam removal. So this is the technical drawing for the fishway that you just saw. It took years of discussions with a fleet of engineers and very careful calculations of the water flows, figuring out every little piece of it. It was years more complexity than a dam removal. In a lot of cases, dam removals can also be complicated, but one of the reasons I'm sharing this, and in fact in the back we have copies of this fabulous publication which has never been out in the world before. It is the 2022 updated guide for project managers for removing small dams, which you can have a copy of today. So we're trying to share this information with people about the ideas of fish passage with a technical fishway versus the dam removal. So this is an overview of some of our costs for these 3 different projects. And basically we found that technical fishways were on the order of 6 times more expensive. And that doesn't include the years of future maintenance and your hopes that the person that you worked with building the fishway will stay just as healthy and enthusiastic on into the future. So this is my plea to all of you as you're thinking about these and talking to people and looking at things in the news to understand some of the bigger pictures for the kind of decisions that we have to have in Maine. Oh yeah, by the way, post-construction, once you're done, there's a lot of maintenance that will have to happen. And with dam removal, we did spend a lot of time and energy working on removing invasive plants from the stream banks, but that was, relatively easy compared to some of the other aspects of maintaining a technical fishway or fish ladder. So, of course, lots of partners for any project. We were lucky to have a lot of supportive partners, and we got technical expertise from them and a lot of different kinds of help. And now I'm shifting to general thoughts on other restoration projects or potential projects in Maine. So there are a lot of different things going on in different rivers in the state, I think it's fair to say. I often wish that we could take a simple cookie cutter approach and say, okay, this is how we're doing this in this one river, and then we can just do it 5 more times in 5 different places and have the same outcomes. But we really can't, because usually the people are the complicated part, and whatever ideas people have in one place are not the same as another. So this is kind of my list as I was thinking about some of the projects that I'm involved in and some of the ones that we're hearing about where people are working on improving fish passage. So one of the sad one at the top, the Mousom River down in New York County, there are 3 dams. They've been taken out of their hydropower production, and we've been waiting for years for FERC to approve a surrender application to tell the owner what to do with it. So unfortunately, in the world of dams, we have these agencies that sometimes act slowly and other times in mysterious ways, and that's certainly the case on the Mousom. Good news from the Presumpscot, things are moving forward. The Sakarapa Dam was removed. The way that entire restoration project started was through a fish passage proceeding, which involved collaboration between state and federal agencies to essentially force the first dam owner to install a fishway there. And that's a complicated process that may be used in other situations in Maine when really nothing else can be done. Royal River, 2 dams, lots of conversations. Sabattis is kind of an exciting restoration project in the Androscoggin. One of the not so great things that I am aware of in the world of rivers now, we have a number of dams that have certification from the Low Impact Hydropower, what's the I for, LIHI, Low Impact Hydro Institute. And that gives them higher, they get more money for the energy produced because it goes to Massachusetts and they get green power benefits. The downside is that it kind of settles in place some situations where dams that don't have fish passage end up kind of getting benefits, and the status quo is kind of fossilized in place. That's the case to a certain degree on the Cobbossee system, where there's one dam that has this low impact, it's not really low impact, but they get a little bit of greenwashing certification because the dam below it has absolutely no fish passage. So one of the things that I hope is good news, the Cobbossee system has potential for up to 3 million alewives. It's a huge system of many, many lakes. It's been a great source of headaches for many years now. There's this interesting idea that 2 people from the Cobbossee Watershed District have, which is that marine-derived nutrients in the form of alewives coming into a watershed will cause pollution. So in the past few months, I've spent quite a bit of time working with people from the Cobbossee Watershed District, as well as the Department of Marine Resources and DEP, to try and get past this idea, which is essentially blocking the entire watershed. So no promises, but I'm hoping that before too long there will be an adaptive management plan for that watershed, because it's really important, and it would be just awesome to be shooting millions and millions of fish out into the Kennebec and Gardner. So yeah, Weber Pond, we're working on restoring fish passage to double the numbers, if we can get them up into 3 Mile Pond. Some of these other rivers I just kind of listed and thought I would see if people had any questions. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time.
We've got plenty.
Plenty, okay.
Fabulous.
Okay, great. Let's see, so we're working on restoration in the Madomic River system, which is exciting because I think a lot of people feel like that's where a lot of restoration in Maine kind of started. We're dealing with a dam in Washington Pond, and then another one, and then a bunch of culverts. So hoping that a lot of this infusion of federal funding and enthusiasm for fish passage will help us pick through that many barriers in that system. Maine Rivers is a part of the Kennebec Coalition, and so for a decade now, we've been involved in advocating for improving fish passage at the 4 dams owned by Brookfield, the 4 main stem dams, going from Waterville up to Skowhegan. This week, a biological opinion was released by NOAA, which made its way into the news, basically saying that NOAA believes that these 4 dams can essentially have functional fish passage with the dams remaining in place. It's a very frustrating conclusion for me and many of the organizations that I work with. We look at the numbers of salmon on the Kennebec and are very, very concerned that the idea of tweaking fish passage at these large main stem dams is just not going to be ambitious enough to restore the river for the salmon. And the Kennebec should have the largest runs. It's really a huge tragedy if this opportunity passes, and Brookfield has been enormously problematic along the way. So that's not a happy story right now. The Maguntacook in Camden, probably some of you are aware, there's ongoing discussions there to figure out what to do with 7 dams, some of them owned by the town, and lo and behold, I think people are a complicating factor there. I think it could be a good project, so if you have friends in Camden, do anything you can to help them figure that complicated process out. One of the stories in the news recently was on the Penobscot, the Milford Dam. I mentioned the Low Impact Hydro Institute, which gives credit for the Milford Dam, which following the Penobscot River Restoration Project, that very ambitious project that removed dams and built a bypass around the Howland Dam. We're now finding that fish passage at the Milford Dam is not as good as it could be or should be, and hasn't been meeting its performance standards. So that's another one of these cases where it takes science and advocacy to make sure that the people who are managing fisheries are actually reaching the standards and performance goals that they are supposed to. So it's been very disturbing to find that this very important restoration project, which hinged on having excellent fish passage at Milford, is kind of like actually not really as good as it should be. Finally, the St. Croix River, stay tuned for good news. The Milltown Dam, as far as I know, is going to be removed this coming summer. It's very exciting for me to think that over a period of 11 years, the St. Croix has gone from being a river that was kind of pushed out of people's minds and stuck in kind of a sad impasse to now a priority and an area where federal funds and partnerships are coming together. It should be the largest and most powerful producing river for alewives, and I think it's fair to say that that opportunity is now coming to fruition. It's going to take a lot of work by a lot of people, but we've gone from this dreadful situation where people stuck a board into a dam to keep alewives completely out, to now collaboration between people in New Brunswick and Maine, Canada and the US, and funding coming into place to help that river come to meet some of its potential, which is vast. Couple other things I thought I would mention. Stay tuned, I hope, for some news on improving dam safety in Maine. Maine doesn't really have much of a dam safety program. It's my hope that in the future we may set up some sort of program like other states have, where people who own dams have responsibilities for them, including making sure that they're safe. And frankly, I would like to see dam ownership include functional fish passage at them as well, but that's just my dream. So we got a bill passed in the legislature to review Maine's largely non-existent dam safety program, and that's going to be moving forward. Also hoping to have some progress on a collaborative project between DEP and DMR to look at the classification of rivers and say that if a dam doesn't have any form of functional fish passage and native species are not able to be to make their way above it, if you have a barrier that limits sustainable populations of indigenous species, that river section would be considered in non-attainment for goals of the Clean Water Act. So it's a kind of an interesting basic idea, but it's, you know, it takes a lot of work to get these complicated agencies to figure out how to make some of the things happen that we think makes sense in terms of looking at rivers. So to my mind, fishable, clean rivers with healthy populations of sea-run fish, that's all we want. We just have to figure out how to have all the partnerships and collaboration to get everybody else on the program with us. So feel free to grab a copy of your own guide for project managers for removing small dams, and if it's helpful, let us know, or if you have any questions, be happy to answer them, and always happy to talk with you guys. Yeah?
On the Mid-Ark River, that's where I live, are they doing anything with the fish passage behind the VFW where the falls are?
Let's see, there's some, I know the town has purchased a fish counting apparatus and has been working with DMR, hopefully over the course of the winter and spring, to figure out where to put it in so they can start getting some numbers. So we are working further up in the watershed, you know, to try and get the access open up there, but basically, so to answer that, not sure. I know there's been a lot in the past. The work we're doing on the Menominee is not super fast. You know, there are a lot of different barriers, and we spent a fair amount of time in the past year just gathering the information about where the various barriers are, who owns them, and making plans for fixing them. So, yeah.
On the dam safety bill,
Yeah.
I was just wondering, like, if there's a set kind of process on that, how that's going to happen, and if there's any kind of way that there can be like a tie between dam safety and, I don't know, public health and fishways, or is that kind of the idea that maybe, I don't want to call it Trojan horse, but a way to move fish passage into something that's safety?
Well, the first part of it is that the dam safety currently is in MEMA, the Maine Emergency Management Agency, and what Maine was able to do was get a bill passed to basically do like a overview physical. They're basically going to have somebody come in from the National Dam Safety Program and look at Maine's and say, how about this? Do you have this? No. How about this? Do you have that? Not so much. So basically doing kind of an overview from, you know, somebody with the right expertise. So that's the first step. It's really problematic though, because when this bill was being heard in the legislature, they were, the director was saying, we don't have time to improve the program because we don't have enough staff, and by the way, we can't hire anyone because nobody wants to work for us because we don't pay enough money. So it's this like, very frustrating circle. So currently the guy who had been the previous dam safety inspector retired and is now working as a contractor doing the same work. So stay tuned. I hope there's room for improvement, but it's, like a lot of things, it was a bit slower than we expected. Looking at how things are done in New Hampshire and Pennsylvania, there's a lot of opportunity. But it's also tricky, people sometimes don't like anything to change. So stay tuned. I'll let you know when there's something more to know. Yeah, any other questions?
You guys ought to grill her. She's good at answering questions.
Oh, yeah, actually one other piece that.
I know you have some. Go ahead.
Have any of you guys heard of the Alewife Interaction Committee? It's, Bailey, it's a long series of meetings between IFNW, DMR, who else? TNC, yeah, I brought, if you want to read some things, and they've basically been coming up with long lists of all the different things they need to study in this kind of approach to try and suss out any potential problems with restoring alewives. It's a little bit frustrating because the same amount of energy is not being put into discussing all the valuable reasons. So if anybody's interested in that, I can share this information. It's a little bit of the opposite of a joy, I think. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Landis.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.